Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind was sharp that morning, dry and cold, carrying dust across the open plains like it had somewhere urgent to be. Orin Oakes reined in his horse when he spotted something strange by the side of the dirt road. A woman, kneeling in the grass, cradling a child who looked far too still. He swung out of the saddle before his boots even hit the ground. "Ma'am," the woman did not turn. Her back was stiff, her shoulders trembling. Wrapped in a threadbare shawl, dark curls escaping her braid, she held the child close. Orin stepped forward slow, palms open. "Is the boy all right?" he asked. She finally looked up. Her eyes were wild and red-rimmed, but there was a fierce steadiness in them. "She has a fever. I do not know how high, but she is burning." Orin crouched, taking in the child's flushed cheeks and limp arms. "There's a cabin 2 miles up," he said. "Mine, fire's going. I have clean water, salt, some willow bark. You need to come now." The woman hesitated, hugging the girl tighter. "I don't know you. I'm not asking you to trust me forever, just long enough to save that child." His voice dropped. "Please?" She looked down at the girl, then back at him, and nodded once. "I'll carry her," Orin said, already peeling off his coat. "No," the word tore from her mouth, but her hands were shaking badly now, and the child gave a soft, pained whimper. She bit her lip and nodded again. Orin wrapped the girl carefully in his coat, lifting her with practiced gentleness. She was light as a feather, her breath shallow against his chest. He mounted with her in his arms, then reached a hand down. The woman took it. He pulled her up behind him. They rode in silence, the only sound the wind and the rasp of the child's breathing. Orin could feel the woman's body pressed tight behind him, her hand gripping his belt as though afraid she might fall if she let go. By the time they reached his cabin nestled between 2 hills, the girl hadn't stirred. He carried her inside, laying her on a cot near the fire. The woman followed on trembling legs, her eyes locked on the child. "What's her name?" Orin asked, kneeling beside the cot. "Orella," she whispered. "She's 5. He touched the girl's forehead. "You her mother?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "My name's Winry Lowell." "I'm Orin Oakes," he said. "Just let me help." Winry nodded and knelt beside her daughter, brushing sweat-matted hair from her face. Orin moved around the cabin with quiet speed. He fetched water from the barrel, crushed dried willow bark, soaked a rag and laid it across Orella's forehead. He handed Winry a cup with a little salt and boiled water. "Get her to sip this if she can." Winry coaxed a little into her daughter's mouth. Orella coughed but swallowed. "Where were you headed?" Orin asked, voice low. "Nowhere," she said. "We were left. My sister and I came west with a man who promised us land near Cheyenne. She died last spring. He left a week ago, said he needed to find work in Laramie. Never came back." Orin's jaw clenched. "He left you and a child alone." Winry nodded, eyes fixed on her daughter. "She's going to make it," Orin said. "She just needs time. Fever's high but not too far gone." Winry's shoulders sagged and she covered her face with her hands. Orin grabbed a blanket and draped it around her shoulders. "You're safe here, both of you." She looked up at him, eyes filled with more than tears, weariness, fear, and something like relief. "Thank you." He nodded, then sat across the room, giving her space, but his eyes never left them. That night, Orella slept without tossing. Winry drifted off in the chair beside the cot, her head resting on folded arms. Orin stayed up, feeding the fire, listening to the wind howl outside. It was the first time in a long while he had not felt alone. The next morning, Orella coughed herself awake with a weak cry. "Mama," she murmured. Winry rushed to her side. "I'm here, baby, I'm right here." Orella's eyes fluttered open, her skin still pale, but her lips moved. "Hungry?" Winry laughed and wept at the same time, pressing kisses to her daughter's cheeks. Orin stood in the doorway, watching them with something tight in his chest. He made porridge and brought it over. Winry helped feed Orella, her hands steady now. The child ate slow, but she ate. Afterward, while Orella slept again, Winry stepped outside for air. Orin followed quietly. She leaned against the porch railing, her arms folded. "You saved her." "You did," Orin said. "You carried her all that way." "I thought she was going to die in my arms." Her voice broke. I was not ready to lose her. You didn't, you held on, that mattered. She looked at him then, really looked. Why did you help us? Orin shrugged. Because I could. And because no one helped my mother when she needed it. Winry reached out and laid a hand on his arm. You are a good man, Orin Oakes. He wanted to say something back, something simple and true, but the words stuck. So instead, he covered her hand with his. They stood like that, the wind brushing past them, the sun climbing higher. And somewhere inside him, something quiet and long-starved stirred. By the third day, Orella was sitting upright, playing with the buttons on Orin's coat. She smiled at him, small and shy. He smiled back. Winry watched them from the stove where she was stirring beans. Her face was calmer now. She looked rested, though the past still clung to her in the curve of her shoulders. That night after Orella went to sleep, Winry sat across from Orin by the fire. She asked me if we were going to stay, she said softly. What did you tell her? I said I did not know. Orin met her eyes. You can, as long as you need to. Her fingers tightened on her mug. She is all I have, Orin. Then let her have more. Winry looked at him, eyes wide. What do you mean? I mean, I do not want you to go. He said it plain, no hesitation. She stared at him for a long moment, then set her mug down. Neither do I. Orin leaned forward and their hands met over the table. Her fingers were warm now, steady. His heart beat like hooves over hard earth. No more running, no more empty nights, just this, her, the child. A cabin with firelight and a second chance. The morning after Orella sat up and ate a full bowl of porridge, Winry rose early and stepped outside barefoot, the dew soaking through her hem. She stood on the edge of the porch with her arms crossed, eyes following a hawk rising in slow circles over the hills. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing faint scars along her forearms, light as old handwriting. Orin didn't ask about them. He was splitting kindling by the shed when he saw her tilt her head, listening to the stillness like it was music she hadn't heard in a long while. She didn't speak until he finished stacking the last of the wood. Where do you go when you leave on that horse of yours? He tugged his gloves off slow and straightened. Most days just east. There's a trap line I run along the stream bed. Sometimes I check on the old Grayson property. Coyotes keep nosing around the barn. She nodded once, but her eyes stayed fixed on the open field. When I was a girl, I used to think the world ended at the edge of the trees. Past that was just stories. Seems like you went past it. I didn't mean to, she said. I just kept walking. Orella called from inside, her voice raspier than before but stronger. Winry turned, then paused. Your horse, what's his name? Darrow, she blinked, surprised. That's my family name. Orin rubbed the back of his neck. Didn't know that. He had it when I got him. She gave a soft sound, not quite a laugh. Maybe that means something? He watched her disappear inside, the door clicking shut behind her. He didn't move for a long time. By mid-morning, Orella had dragged a small stool near the hearth and was drawing on scraps of sackcloth with a piece of char. Her tongue poked out the side of her mouth as she sketched. Winry sat near the window, mending the hem of a dress she had found folded in the cedar chest. It was slightly too big, but clean and whole. You sew regular? Orin asked, scrubbing the basin after washing their breakfast dishes. I used to do fine work back in Missouri, made altar cloths and christening gowns. She tied off a stitch and leaned back. Haven't had a needle in my hand since last autumn. Feels strange, like waking up somewhere you forgot you knew. He dried his hands slowly. You could sew for folks in town. They'd pay fair, better than trapping or hauling freight. Do you go into town often? She asked. Only when I have to. Too many voices. Winry tilted her head, and yet you took in 2 strangers. I didn't need quiet, I just didn't like the way it was filled. She looked at him for a long moment before returning to her stitching. That afternoon, Orin saddled Darrow and rode out toward the line of cottonwoods near the creek. The traps hadn't caught much a rabbit, a broken snare and tracks that looked like a fox had circled and gone. He reset them quick and straight, then stopped by the Grayson barn. The boards were sagging worse than last week, and a fresh pile of feathers told him the henhouse was down 2 birds. No prints, but the wire had been chewed. When he returned, the sky had gone silver gray and low. Rain was coming. Winry was on the porch, a pail beside her, peeling potatoes with a paring knife that looked like it had seen better decades. "I was going to set stew on," she said. "If that's all right. It's your kitchen now, too." She looked down at the blade in her hand, then back up at him. "I've been thinking," she said. "There's a schoolhouse in town, isn't there? 2 miles west. Miss Aberly runs it, tough woman but fair. If I taught Orella her letters, do you think Miss Aberly would take her come spring? She'd be lucky to have her." He stepped up onto the porch. "You thinking of staying that long?" Winry didn't answer right away. Her knife moved steady through another potato. "I've been looking at that back room. The one with the narrow window. I use it for storing tools. It could hold a bed." His heart kicked against his ribs, but he kept his voice even. "I'll clear it out." A gust of wind lifted the edge of her braid. She tucked it behind her ear and gave a small nod. Inside, Orella was curled beneath the quilt, her eyes closed, breathing deep and even. Orin paused in the doorway to watch her. Her cheeks were fuller now, her hands not so frail. He turned to find Winry at the stove, the scent of onions and meat rising warm and rich. "You always cook like that?" he asked. "Like what? Like you're building something?" She stirred the pot once slowly. "Maybe I am." That night after supper, while Winry hemmed the last of the dress and Orella slept, Orin lit a second lamp and fetched a small wooden box from beneath the floorboard. He set it on the table between them and opened the creaking lid. Inside were a few folded letters, a compass, and a photograph faded but still clear enough to make out a woman holding a child on her lap. Winry glanced at it. "Your mother," he nodded. "She died when I was 16. Winter came early. We didn't have enough put back." Winry reached out and touched the corner of the photograph, her fingers gentle. "She looks brave." "She was." He closed the lid. "I think she'd have liked you." Winry didn't speak for a long time. Then softly, "I think I'd have liked her." The rain came just after midnight, a steady hush against the roof. Orin lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of it. He could hear soft breathing from the other room, 2 sets, even, alive. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of it. The storm passed by morning, leaving the earth dark and heavy with scent. The grass bent low under the weight of rain, and the creek behind the cabin moved faster, swollen and loud. Orin stood at the edge of the porch, oilskin coat damp on his shoulders, watching the clouds drift apart like they'd been pulled by hand. Inside, Winry was brushing Orella's hair, slow and deliberate. She sat behind her daughter on the cot, humming something low and tuneless. The girl's eyes fluttered, nearly asleep again, her breathing soft and easy. Orin turned back toward the house when he heard the door open behind him. "I want to plant something," Winry said, stepping out with her arms folded, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "Not big. Just enough for spring greens, maybe radishes." Orin looked at the sodden patch by the cabin wall where wild mustard sometimes sprang up. "Soil there's soft. We could turn it over next week once it dries." She nodded, then glanced toward the horizon. "Back home, my sister used to say the ground could remember you. If you gave it something, it gave something back." He studied her for a moment. "You miss her?" "Every day." Her voice didn't waver. "We didn't always get along. She was stubborn, thought I was soft. But she never let go of my hand, not once, not until the fever took her." Orin didn't speak, just stepped down into the yard and picked up the hoe leaning against the shed. He scraped a line across the soft earth, then another, marking a small square. Winry came down beside him. "You don't have to start now, it's still wet." "I know," he said, "but this way it'll be waiting." Later that day, while Orella napped again, Winry joined Orin in the shed. He was sorting through old nails and strips of canvas, pulling out anything still sound. "I'd like to make a few curtains," she said, picking up one of the cloth bundles. "Nothing fancy, just enough to keep the sun off her face come summer. There's some muslin in the crate near the back, might need boiling." She found it, unfolded the edge. You keep everything, don't you? Only what's worth something. Winry ran a hand along the wall, fingers tracing the grain in the boards. This place. It doesn't feel like it belongs to just one person. It feels like it's been waiting. For what? She looked at him. For company. The wind shifted through the open door, bringing the smell of wet pine. Orin set the hammer down and stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough to feel the warmth of her body. I've never built anything that lasted, she said. Not really. Not with someone. You're not the only one. She reached up, brushed a bit of straw from his shoulder. It's strange. You don't feel like someone I met a week ago. He didn't step back. You don't feel like someone I have to learn. That night, the lamp burned low while Winry patched a thin spot in Orella's coat. Orin sat in the corner sharpening his knife, the rasp of metal soft and steady. The girl was asleep again, curled under the quilt with her arm tucked beneath her cheek. Winry set the coat aside and turned toward him. You ever been to Denver? She asked. He looked up, surprised. Once. Drove cattle through, stayed a day, too many streets. Why? My father used to send letters from there. He left when I was little. Promised he'd come back with money for us to start fresh. We got 4 letters, then nothing. Orin leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. Did you ever think about going to find him? When I was younger, but I don't think I ever really wanted to. I think I just wanted to believe he hadn't forgotten. You don't need someone who disappeared, he said. You need someone who stays. She met his gaze across the room. Are you saying you'll stay? I'm not going anywhere. They didn't speak after that for a long while. But the quiet held something new, something settled. Orin set the knife aside and Winry stood. She crossed the space between them and reached for his hand. He took it, her fingers were firm and certain, and when he rose, she didn't move away. She touched his face, palm warm against his cheek. You feel like home, she said. He bent his head, brushing his lips across her forehead. So do you. Outside, the frogs began to sing along the creek, low and steady. Inside, the fire burned down to coals and the girl slept on, safe beneath the roof that now belonged to all 3 of them. The frost came late that year, creeping in quiet beneath the eaves one morning as the rooster down the valley crowed against the cold. Winry stepped out with Orella bundled against her hip, a shawl wrapped snug around them both. The girl pressed her cheek to her mother's collarbone, her breath visible in the chill. Orin was hauling buckets from the creek, his boots sinking in the thickening mud. He looked up when he heard the hinge and his face softened. Creek's still running clear, he said, setting the buckets by the door. But it'll crust over soon. Winry shifted Orella gently to her other side. I'd like to put up more jars. I saw the last of the carrots in the root cellar. If we stew them with venison, they'll keep better. He nodded. There's a buck trail above the ridge. I'll ride out tomorrow. She hesitated, then glanced toward the hill. I want to come with you. Orella stirred at that, her eyes half open. Orin brushed a hand across the child's braid. She can stay with Mrs. Hanley. She's been asking after you both since summer. Winry looked down at her daughter. Would she cry? She wouldn't, Orin said. She'd be proud you were learning the land. They left just after dawn the next day, the sky pale gold, their rifles strapped to their backs and packs filled with bread and dried apples. The trail ran narrow between stands of aspen, the leaves long gone, trunks pale like bone. Orin led Darrow by the reins while Winry walked beside him, her boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. Do you ever miss being alone? She asked, eyes on the ridge ahead. He didn't answer right away. I used to think quiet meant peace. But it was just the kind of hollow that echoes. Winry touched the leather strap of her pack. I used to dread sleeping through the night. It meant waking up to the same ache. He looked at her then, the slope behind her catching full morning light. You don't feel that now? She shook her head slow. No, I feel like I have somewhere to belong when I wake. They came upon fresh tracks just before midday, prints sharp in the soft dirt, the kind that told of a lone buck not long gone. Orin crouched beside them, tracing the edge with his gloved finger. He's headed through the ravine, he said. We'll need to circle wide or he'll catch our wind. Winry followed without question, stepping carefully over roots and slick stone. They moved in tandem, quiet as the shadows between the trees. When the shot came, it rang clean. The buck dropped without a sound. Afterward, Orin knelt beside the body, murmured something Winry couldn't quite hear, then began the work of dressing the meat. She didn't flinch. She held the hide as he worked, her hands steady, her gaze fixed. They returned near dusk, the sky streaked with copper. Mrs. Hanley met them at the porch with Orella asleep against her shoulder. She played with the quilt squares most the day, the woman said, gently passing the child to Winry. Didn't fuss once. Winry kissed her daughter's temple, her arms tightening. Orin wrapped the venison in muslin and set it in the smokehouse while the women spoke in low voices. That night, after the girl was settled and the fire burned low, Winry sat by the hearth with her hands in her lap. Orin handed her a mug of tea, the steam curling between them. "Thank you for letting me come," she said. "You didn't need my permission." "I did," she said, "not because you'd stop me, but because I needed to know you saw me as capable." He sat beside her. "You've walked farther than most men I've known." She turned toward him, her face lit gold by the firelight. "You see me now, Orin." "I always did." Her gaze didn't waver. "Then ask me to stay. Not just because it's warm here or because she's safe. Ask me because you want me here." He reached for her hand. "Stay, Winry, because this place is only half full without you." She leaned into him then, her head resting against his shoulder, her fingers twining with his. The fire popped softly. Outside, the wind moved through the dry grass, but the cabin held firm. Inside, nothing was empty. The first snow came quiet, blanketing the hills in a hush that softened every sound. Winry stood at the window with her hands wrapped around a mug, watching flakes drift sideways past the glass, slow and unhurried. Orella lay on a pallet near the hearth, stringing dried berries onto a bit of thread, her tongue tucked into one cheek as she worked. Orin stepped in from the lean-to, shaking powder from his shoulders. His cheeks were red from the cold, his coat dusted white. He set down a coil of rope near the door and glanced toward the girl. "She's focused," he said, pulling off his gloves. "She likes making patterns," Winry replied, her voice low. "Says they help her think." He crossed to the fire and crouched beside Orella. "Those for the tree," she nodded without looking up. "Mama said I could decorate it if I was careful. You're doing a fine job." Winry turned from the window and moved to the table, laying out a piece of linen she'd been hemming. Her needle had dulled halfway through, but she kept working, steady and precise. Orin poured a dipper of water and drank. "I was thinking we might ride into town tomorrow," he said. "The doctor's passing through, might be worth having him look at her lungs." Winry nodded, setting her needle down. "She's stronger. But I'd like someone to listen, just in case." He hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else." She looked up. "I spoke with Miss Aberly. She's agreed to take Orella come spring, said she'd hold a place." Winry's eyes softened. "Thank you, Orin. I told her you might come too. Help with the smaller ones. She remembers your sister said the two of you once embroidered hymnals for the circuit preacher." Winry blinked, surprised. That was nearly 10 years ago. She hasn't forgotten. Orella held up her string of berries. "Can I hang it now?" Winry nodded, and the girl padded toward the tree, bare feet light on the wooden floor. Orin watched her go, then turned back to Winry. "You've made it warmer in here," he said. "Not just with the fire," she smiled, quiet and sure. "You gave us more than a roof." That night, after the girl was tucked in, Winry stepped out onto the porch wrapped in her shawl. Orin followed, lantern in hand. The snow had stopped, leaving a pale sheen over everything. She leaned on the railing, breath rising in wisps. "I never thought I'd be someone's wife," she said softly. "Not after everything. I thought I'd miss that window." "You haven't," Orin said, "if it's still open to me." She turned to him, her voice barely above the wind. "I don't want to lose what we've made here." "You won't," he said. "Not ever." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring, worn smooth at the edge. "It was my mother's. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with it, but now it feels like it was waiting." Winry's hand trembled when he placed it in her palm. I don't need promises made in church halls or papers signed by someone who's never seen the inside of this cabin. You'll have them if you want them, but I'll give you my name and my steadiness either way." She slid the ring onto her finger. "Then I'll take both." He kissed her there on the porch, snow beneath their boots, lantern light flickering between them. It was not hurried or loud, just the quiet joining of two lives already entwined by midwinter. A cradle sat near the hearth, carved from pine. Orella had been the first to notice. She'd pressed her ear to her mother's belly and declared she heard something fluttering. Winry had only smiled and touched her daughter's cheek. In early spring, they rode into town as a family. Winry wore a shawl embroidered with vines, a gift from Miss Aberly. Orella carried her slate and chalk, proud as any scholar. Orin held his wife's hand as they walked the muddy main road, nodding to neighbors who now stopped to ask after the baby or the coming crops. The cabin grew fuller with each season. A garden bloomed behind it, neat rows of lettuce and beets. The smokehouse always held enough, and when the second child came, a quiet boy with dark eyes and a strong grip, he was born into warmth, into hands that had already learned how to hold fast and not let go. Years passed. Orella learned her letters, then her numbers. She taught her brother to tie his boots and helped Orin mend fence posts when the cattle strayed too far. Winry took over the schoolhouse after Miss Aberly retired, her voice steady and firm as she taught children to read by lamplight, and through it all, Orin never strayed far. His hand always found hers when the day was done, and the porch light always burned. They kept no photographs, but the walls of their home spoke louder scratches in the doorframe where the children grew. A hand-carved bench smoothed by years of sitting side by side. A quilt stitched with initials that grew more familiar as time wore on. It was not a life made of grand things. It was a life made of steady ones, and it was theirs completely.